السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala will continue with the talk about Salat al-Jama'ah. And this was before the month of Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from everyone. And going back to the rulings of Salat al-Jama'ah after talking about the virtues of it and how important is Salat al-Jama'ah for each and every one of us, and especially for men, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it mandatory for men, and getting to know these rulings by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easier for the person to follow the orders of Allah. So continuing, where we stopped, Salatul Jama'ah, or the congregational prayer, is to be prayed originally in the masjid. And this is the most virtuous one, or the virtuous place. And the more the Jama'ah is in number, the more virtue it is. And there are also some other criteria, like, for example, if people are following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's a place of virtue. It helps the person to be more steadfast on the deen of Islam, to pray in a masjid that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified that there is more rewards in it, which is the three masajid, al-Masjid al-Haram, and then Masjid al-Nabawi, and al-Masjid al-Aqsa. The Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, and Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, al-Quds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free it and defeat the evil, those who are occupying the land of the Muslimin, the Zionists, and to give victory to the Muslimin. And before we continue, I just wanted to remind ourselves that we have a duty that we need to fulfill. And every single Muslim on the face of earth, they have a duty to fulfill when it comes to the deen of Allah, to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. And each person should know their position very well, and that should be based on knowledge, not based on emotions. Because when the emotions are high, there are two situations where people, it's very difficult to teach them the correct way. As the ulama, they say, at times of happiness, extreme joy, and at the time of extreme sadness or grief. It's very difficult to correct the people. Why? Because the emotions are high. So if people, for example, are celebrating a happy occasion and they're committing sins, if you tell them, fear Allah, this is not permissible, you would find the response is, leave us alone, we're having fun, don't ruin our happiness, because the emotions are high. And if people are grieving or sad or so, you tell them, well, this is not the proper way to act. They will say, leave us alone. We're not into this. We're sad. How can you say that when we're in that situation? So that's why it's the people of Ahl Sunnah, the people of knowledge, they should convey the truth to the people, and people need to be patient. And we have ilm, we have knowledge in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in every situation in our life. And I don't want to take too much time of the lecture in this, but this is definitely is needed. But the weak and oppressed, or the masses, those who have no authority, the Muslims are either people of authority like the leaders, or the masses of the people. The people of authority, they are the ones that they're supposed to take matters physically if they have the means. And if they don't have the means, which is valid to happen at certain times of age that we live in, if they don't have the means, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will excuse them as long as they're taking the means and preparing themselves, right? But this is their job. That's why the subject of al-jihad, physical jihad, and things like this is to the people of authority. This is not the individuals. Unless a person's house is being attacked on a personal level, that's a different situation. But when it comes to the masses of the people, there is things to be done. And one of which is the dua, definitely. And this is something that is important, and the dua has an effect. And not to belittle the dua, not to think that this is something that is not really helping the people on the ground. This is the most effective means for people to be helped on the ground, is to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and never to think that there's no effect of the dua, or we've been making dua and there's no change of the situation. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He will change the situation immediately. And that's why there's importance of knowing matters of fiqh, matters of aqidah in this subject. And when we're talking about aqidah, right, what is the effect of learning the aqidah if a Muslim does not know how to deal with these situations? Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran in many different places that everything is by the will of Allah, and especially when it came in talking about the punishment of the disbelievers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَوْلَا كَلِمَةٌ سَبَقَتْ مِنْ رَبِّكَ لَكَانَ لِزَامًا وَأَجَلٌ مُسَمَّى. This is in Surah Taha. And there are the like of this verse in many places in the Quran, that if it wasn't for a word preceded from your Lord, it would have been done by necessity, meaning that they will be punished. But there's a set time for this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed a set time for this. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He can destroy them immediately. The oppressors, the evildoers, the disbelievers fighting the believers, and so on. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the punishment, has already ordained and when it's going to happen. And وَلَقَدْ سَبَقَتْ كَلِمَتُنَا لِعِبَادِنَا الْمُرْسَلِينَ, that our word had preceded for our slaves, the messengers. إِنَّهُمْ لَهُمُ الْمَنْصُورُونَ, indeed they are going to be the ones that are victorious. So the matter is, why is that? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَانْتَصَرَ مِنْهُمْ وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَ بَعْضَكُمْ بِبَعْضٍ. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He would make you victorious. But it's to test you, to try you, one versus the other. Because there are sunan that can never change, which is in tansurullah yansurkum, if you make Allah victorious, Allah will make you victorious, and so on. So again, these are rules, these are matters of belief, to know the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. So this is a great opportunity to change ourselves, to change in the situation of the people by getting to know our religion, by being firm upon matters of belief, by being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, giving da'wah on these bases, but not to take false means or non-permissible means or sinful means, thinking that this will bring any means of help. That's why when the matter becomes in the hands of activists, politicians, people without knowledge, and the emotions are high, you would find all kinds of strange things against the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that people will applaud and will be thinking that they did their part. Good intentions is not something to be questioned. Everybody, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows their intentions, but the physical actions has to be judged according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and matters of knowledge, even if it's against what people would consider. And that's why, as a rule in the Sharia, right, and the end does not justify the mean, right? Now, this is not a rule in the Sharia, of course. This is to refute the false principle that people follow, which in many cases they would do that with their actions. If the objective is good, then they take whatever means to reach that objective, even if it's haram. Of course, this is not permissible in the deen of Islam. The rule in the Sharia is al-wasa'il laha nafs ahkam al-maqasid. We have maqasid and we have wasa'il. Maqasid, objectives, goals. Wasa'il, means, right? So the principle is that if you can examine every single evidence in the Quran and the Sunnah, right, that the means have the same rulings as the objectives, meaning the objective has to be halal and correct and sound and good, and the means to it has to be halal, sound, and good. So therefore, I'm just going to jump to the question here with regards to the protests. You know, protesting is, what's the purpose of protesting, right? Whether people think this can be mean of change, pressuring governments, all these types of things. I'm not going to get into the details of this, but with whatever reason there is, protesting would never be free from sins. There's always sins involved, right? Protesting, that means you allow the masses to just show their support and things like this, right? Whether it has a good effect or not, this is not the issue here, but it has the means to do this involves sins. This is not the way that Muslims do change and bring the change. right? There can be many different things, and it never worked actually when it comes to the Muslims. But anyway, there's always sins involved. And even when these sins are mentioned, some of the Muslims would ridicule that so much and say, "What you're talking about? We're facing a very major, disaster is happening, and you're talking about free mixing. It's haram. That when the salah time comes, people do not make salah. That people, they might cause all kinds of evil things like looting or killing or whatever there is in protests, and all of this is not valid at all times, but again, haram is haram, and we have to, in these types of situations, as a way to bring this to the right rulings, we have to listen to the people of knowledge. If people think that they have matters in their own hands, and since they are in politics or they're activists or whatever there is, that means they know better and they can give rulings and they can say to people that this is very effective and so on, then it's better than to stay home and to isolate oneself. Because without the people of knowledge, people are in chaos. And if people claim that there is no people of knowledge that they would know these matters, that means everybody should be then on their own. It doesn't work this way. Alhamdulillah, the people of knowledge are present and they're in abundance, and we need to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do. And maybe we can have an extensive subject in that, inshallah ta'ala, by reading the Quran. We need to read the Quran. The Quran is not just a book of seeking blessings from it. The Quran gives us the cure, the means, the path to success, explains our situation in so much details. There is amazing, and it's miraculous in itself, whether it's with stories mentioned in the Quran, clear evidence, direct evidences, verses, amazing situations that is mentioned in the Quran. But again, many are not reading the Quran and not referring to the people of knowledge, those who have the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah, that in many cases might oppose what people think, because people only see the apparent things in this world. And the people of knowledge, it's not that they are revealed to them or inspired by Allah, but they have the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, where the religious means take precedence and take control over the physical means. And if people would follow the religious means, the wahi means, all kinds of goodness will happen to them. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us. Going back to Salat al-Jama'ah. Salat al-Jama'ah, congregational salah, without going into the differences of opinions among the ulama, since it's mandatory for men, and as we mentioned before, it should be done in the masjid, of course, and we talked about the hadith about that. But if someone missed Salat al-Fard in Jama'ah in the masjid, then for men, they should find a Jama'ah to pray the Fard, right? So praying at home, don't pray the Fard alone. If you missed Salatul Jama'ah, or if you live far away from the masjid, make sure that you pray in congregation. Of course, with the best of one's ability. Otherwise, if a person doesn't have the means, what can he do? So this is with Salatul Jama'ah and the ruling of it. I'm not sure if we talked about that issue, is about the ruling of women going to the masjid. It's permissible for women to go to the masjid and to pray Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid, as long as there's no sins involved. And as the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, إِذَا اسْتَأْذَنَكُمْ نِسَاؤُكُمْ بِاللَّيْلِ إِلَى الْمَسْجِدِ فَأْذَنُوا لَهُنْ. If your women taking permission from you to go to the masjid at night, then give them the permission. So it shows beautifully that women in the deen of Islam, we need to be patient with the orders of Allah, with the deen of Allah. The women, they should not leave their homes unless they seek permission. It's not a life of oppression, right? But it's a life of goodness and righteousness, right? And there's always the ideal situation is that women in Islam, they are in need of men, and men are in need of women. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the men in charge with goodness, with good living together, with all kinds of good manners and leniency and so on. And at the same time, when the women are obedient to their husbands and things like this, then they do not leave. But if they seek permission, the Prophet ﷺ is addressing the men, give them the permission. Of course, as long as no sins are involved. And this is a detailed subject. What is the minimum number for Jama'ah? Is it 2 or 3? 2 people would make a Jama'ah. If there are 2 people, they would make Jama'ah. 1 person is 1 person. is Salatul Munfarid. But two people will make Jama'ah, and that's why if someone is praying with someone else, all the rulings of Salatul Jama'ah is to be established. And that's why a person might change from being alone to be in Jama'ah or vice versa. A person praying alone, and then someone joins with him in the Salah to be a ma'mum, to be a follower. The person that is praying alone, he has to have the intention of being an imam right there for him to follow the one that just joined with him. Right, so he changed from being praying alone to praying an imam, and that has rulings that applies. Or a person is praying in Jama'ah, but he came late, so he missed few rak'at. And when the Imam made salam, he stood up to continue the salah. So now he is munfarid. He is person praying alone after he was in Jama'ah. But Salatul Jama'ah, if it's in the masjid, if the Jama'ah is established in the masjid for the adhan that is called the main Jama'ah of the masjid, anybody that entered the masjid, he should join that Jama'ah and not to make another Jama'ah. It's not permissible. And even if a person is making salah like nafila, sunnah prayer and so on, and he just started the salah and the iqamah is established for the main jama'ah of the masjid, he should walk out of that salah that he's praying and join salatul jama'ah. إذا أقيمت الصلاة فلا صلاة إلا المكتوبة, as the Prophet ﷺ said, if the salah is established or the iqamah is made, no salah is valid except al-maktuba, except the prescribed salah, the obligatory salah. If he has, something like a rak'ah or so to finish and then he can join the jama'ah, sure, but not to start a salah after the iqamah has been established, or to continue even if in the first rak'ah. And if a person goes from one masjid to the other, these are all masail, issues, rulings that has to be clear. Like if you pray, for example, Salatul Dhuhr in the masjid, and this was your fard salah, and then you went to another masjid to meet someone or for whatever reason, and you find them, they're praying Salatul Dhuhr there. You should not say, well, I already prayed my Dhuhr, so I'm just going to sit in the masjid on the side till they finish the salah. No, you have to join them. You have to join the Jama'ah. And this has clear evidences from the Prophet ﷺ, and joining the Jama'ah, and that would be nafl for you. It would be optional salah, not mandatory. Even if it's Salatul Asr, and we know that salah after Salatul Asr is prohibited unless a situation like this. Even Salatul Fajr. But you would pray it an optional salah. And that even happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Prophet ﷺ finished Salatul Fajr one time, and he found two men sitting on the side, did not pray with the people. So he called them to come closer. And the men, they came, tarta'at fara'isuma, as it mentioned in the hadith, they were shivering, meaning they looked disturbed, or they thought that they're in trouble. The Prophet ﷺ is calling them. So the Prophet ﷺ asked them, are you Muslims? They said yes. So he said to them, why didn't you pray with us? See how the Prophet ﷺ asked them. Because if they're not Muslims, this is the only reason why you're not praying. But if you're a Muslim, why you're not praying with us? So they said, O Prophet of Allah, salayna fi rihalina. We prayed in our place, and then we came here. Right? So they prayed, and they thought that that's sufficient for them. The Prophet ﷺ said to them then that if you prayed in your rihal, in your place, and you came and you find the people praying with them. So this is a mandatory thing. Even if you prayed the fard, which shows the importance of Salatul Jama'ah and that unity, that being together with the Muslimin in the Jama'ah. There are excuses to miss. There are certain situations where it's okay to miss Salatul Jama'ah, and these means of that is permissible for the person to miss Salatul Jama'ah, like for men, whether a person is a sickness, marad, or fear, right, or rain. These are the three excuses. Sickness that prevents the person from going to the masjid, or sickness that a person might be able to go to the masjid, but he fears that if he goes, his sickness will get worse. And all by the will of Allah, but this is according to what the doctors had told him or what's known. So that in that case, it's permissible then to pray at home. And if he does not have the means to pray Jama'ah at home, to pray alone. Or fear, if a person fear for his life, in a situation where he goes to the masjid, he might lose his life or get harmed or whatever, then it's okay to pray at home. And the third reason why to miss the Jama'ah, if it's raining, or it's snowing, or it's extreme coldness, something that is exceptional, then it's okay also to miss going to the masjid, and the reward will be given in full by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, إذا مرض العبد أو سافر كتب له ما كان يعمل صحيحا مقيما. If a person gets sick or traveled, it will be written for him what he used to do when he was healthy and when he was resident in his place. So this is by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is some of these rulings. Then after that, what we need to discuss, inshallah ta'ala, we don't have much time to do it now, but we'll stop here. The next time, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about ahkamul imama, the rulings of al-imam, some of the rulings that pertains to al-imam or al-imama in general. Right? If a person leads the salah, and that's usually one person in the salah, and sometimes a person might find himself has to lead the salah because there's no one else, or he is even in his household, he's the man in the household and he has to lead his family in salah, right? So especially with the last year or so that many people, they had to do this. So we have to learn then some of the rulings that is related to the imam, and there's rulings related to the ma'mum, to the followers behind the imam. So we'll do that inshallah ta'ala next time. If you have any questions, please go ahead with whatever few minutes left. So this is with regards to the protest. This is, if you ask me, stay away from all of these protests. This is not the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made as a way of change to the Muslims. And it's, yes, people are not taking it as ibadah for someone to say that's not bid'ah because it's not ibadah. We're not saying that it's, if someone takes it as ibadah, then definitely that's a bid'ah. But of course, yes, people do not do it as ibadah. But you would never avoid sins, if it's not you, it's someone else. And when the ruling comes, it doesn't say, well, if you're good, you're okay, and others, then it's upon them. It doesn't work this way. Plus, this is not the way of the Muslims, right? This is the way of the non-Muslims of change. This is not for us, but rather by being obedient to Allah. And doesn't mean that for a person then to be silent or so. There are other means that is permissible to voice one's opinions and so on, but not in an unpermissible way. And to listen to the people of knowledge in this. What do you do when your mahram is abusing you? Wallahi, every situation should be dealt with individually because this is haram, of course, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade injustice. And there's always things like that happens in life. So people have to deal with it and to push away the harm with whatever permissible means. And what is the level of abuse? Because a child might think that his parents are abusing him because they don't give him a smartphone to have 24 hours a day, right? And he's not happy with that. So things has to be dealt in with reason. But if there is a situation where the mahram is abusing, then things has to be done. It depends on the level of the abuse. What is the abuse? What's the definition of abuse? That's why people need to even sometimes refer to the people of authority to push away the harm. But we're talking about the normal rulings of decent people, that they have care towards one another, and always consult the people of knowledge and to push away harm. Definitely, this is what needs to be done. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, inshallah. Alaikum salam. Is it a must to join a Jama'ah outside of the masjid? No, it's not mandatory. But it might be in a situation where people might think bad of you. Right? So if you're in a situation where people are praying Jama'ah and you already prayed the Farda, for example, people might think of you, why he's not praying with us? Does he consider us as bad people or things like this? Then you might have to join to avoid these types of misunderstanding or so. But these rulings are related to the Jama'ah and the masjid, or the main Jama'ah established. So that's why, to make it easy for oneself, if you go to a place and people are praying Jama'ah, join them in the Jama'ah, even if it's not in the masjid. Not like two people praying on the side and everybody's sitting in a different setting. No, talking about you went to a place, a house, for example, and you entered and you find everybody's praying Jama'ah. Just join them. You go to the park and you're invited there for something and you find the people all praying in Jama'ah. Pray with them. Join them in the Jama'ah and not to sit aside. But inshallah, we'll stop here because of the next class. And the next class is Aqidah class, inshallah. From Al-Aqidah Tahawiyah. So we'll see you then inshallah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam baraka Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.